It was a bright morning in the small town where the local music academy buzzed with excitement. Today was the annual scholarship audition, the day when talented young musicians competed for a single spot that could change their future. Students arrived early, dressed neatly, carrying polished instruments and confident smiles. Among them was a quiet girl who didn't quite fit in with the rest. Her clothes were simple, her shoes a little worn, and her hair tied back with an old ribbon. But her eyes, filled with curiosity and wonder, told a different story. Her name was Lena. She wasn't there to perform. At least that's what she thought. She had come only to watch the auditions, to listen to the sound of the grand piano she had dreamed of touching her whole life. She stood at the back of the hall, hands clasped together, her heart racing with excitement as each contestant took their turn. One after another, skilled players filled the room with music. The notes were perfect, the timing precise. Yet to Lena, something felt missing. The music was flawless, yes, but it lacked the warmth she often imagined when she listened to melodies in her head. Lena had never owned a piano. She learned by watching videos on an old phone and by drawing keyboard outlines on cardboard. Every night after finishing chores, she would sit quietly in her small room and practice on that handmade keyboard, imagining the sound of every note. Her mother often smiled at her dedication, but also worried about her dreams. They didn't have much, and buying a piano was impossible. Still, Lena's heart refused to give up. As the auditions continued, the large doors of the hall suddenly opened, and a gust of air made the curtains sway. The director of the academy entered, his presence commanding respect. Everyone straightened up. Lena stepped aside quickly, hoping to stay unnoticed. But then, as her eyes wandered back to the stage, she couldn't take them off the piano. It was beautiful, with shining black polish and ivory keys that seemed to glow under the lights. She had seen pianos before, but never one this grand. Her heart pulled her toward it. During a short break, the hall emptied for refreshments. Some students gathered in small groups, chatting about their performances. Others laughed, boasting about how well they played. Lena stayed behind, sitting quietly in the corner, her gaze fixed on the piano. She didn't mean to draw attention, but a few students noticed her. One tall boy nudged his friend and whispered, loud enough for Lena to hear, "Hey, look at her. Maybe she wants to play too." The others laughed. Another girl joined in, saying, "Yeah, right, she probably doesn't even know where the middle C is." Their laughter echoed through the room. Lena lowered her head, her cheeks warm with embarrassment. She didn't respond, but the sting of their words stayed with her. When they realized she wasn't leaving, one of them jokingly said, "Go ahead then, touch it. Let's hear what you've got." His tone was teasing, but part of him wanted to see what she'd do. The others chuckled, waiting for her reaction. Lena stood still for a moment, unsure if she should walk away or prove them wrong. Her heart pounded in her chest. She looked at the piano again and took a slow breath. The instrument she had dreamed of for years was right there, just a few steps away. The room grew quieter as some students turned to watch. Even the instructor, who had just returned from the hallway, frowned slightly. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice firm. The tall boy shrugged and said, "She wants to play, sir." The instructor raised an eyebrow. "Really, do you even know how to play?" he asked Lena, not unkindly but with clear doubt in his tone. Lena hesitated. She didn't want to cause trouble, but something inside her whispered that this was her moment. She nodded softly. The instructor sighed. "Make it quick," he said. "We're short on time." The other students snickered under their breath, expecting a clumsy attempt that would end in embarrassment. Lena walked slowly toward the piano. Every step felt heavy, but her determination grew stronger. When she finally reached it, she stopped for a moment and touched the edge gently, as if afraid it would vanish. The smooth, cool surface of the instrument sent a shiver through her. It felt unreal. She sat on the bench and looked at the keys. For a few seconds, she said nothing, did nothing. The room went silent, waiting for her to fail. Then softly, she placed her hands on the keyboard. Her fingers trembled at first, but when she pressed the first note, a clear sound filled the hall. She smiled faintly. The piano responded as if it had been waiting for her. At first, the notes came slowly, almost uncertainly. But then something changed. The melody began to flow, and her hands started to move with confidence. The sound was unlike anything the students had heard all day. It wasn't a rehearsed piece or a perfect technical show. It was real, alive, and full of feeling. Every note carried emotion. There was joy, sadness and hope all woven together in a way that touched something deep inside everyone listening. The students who had laughed before now stood quietly, their smiles fading. The instructor, who had crossed his arms, slowly lowered them, his eyes fixed on Lena's hands. The music grew stronger, filling every corner of the hall. It was as if the piano itself was speaking through her. Even the tall boy who had mocked her looked down, feeling a mix of shame and awe. Lena lost herself in the music. She wasn't in the hall anymore. She was back home, sitting in her little room, playing her cardboard keys, imagining sounds only she could hear. But this time the sound was real, echoing through the air. Her fingers danced across the keys with natural grace. She didn't need to read notes. She played from memory, from emotion, from love. When the melody finally slowed, the room remained utterly silent. No one moved. The last note lingered for a long moment, then faded softly into the air. Lena kept her hands on the piano for a second more, her heart still racing. She finally looked up and saw every eye on her. No one laughed. No one spoke. The silence was deeper than words. For a moment, Lena thought she had done something wrong. She looked at the instructor nervously. His face was unreadable. Then slowly he began to clap. The sound was steady, genuine. The other students followed, their applause growing louder until it filled the hall. Lena blinked, unsure how to react. She smiled shyly, her cheeks warm again. But this time it wasn't from embarrassment. The instructor walked up to her. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked softly. Lena hesitated. "I didn't really learn. I just listened," she said, "and practiced on a cardboard keyboard." The instructor's eyes widened slightly. He had heard many stories in his years of teaching, but this one struck him deeply. He glanced at the other students, who now looked at Lena not with mockery but with respect, even admiration. The tall boy stepped forward awkwardly. "Hey, that was amazing," he said quietly. The others nodded. Lena smiled, still sitting by the piano, her fingers lightly resting on the keys. For the first time, she didn't feel out of place. She felt like she belonged. The director of the academy, who had been standing near the door, approached them. He had heard part of her performance and couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. "Who is this girl?" he asked the instructor. The instructor smiled and replied, "Someone we should have noticed sooner." Lena didn't know what was coming next. She didn't care about the prize or the scholarship anymore. For her, the dream of playing that piano had already come true. She had faced her fears, silenced her critics, and spoken through music in a way words never could. As she left the hall later that day, she turned back for one last look at the piano. The sun shone through the window, making the black surface gleam. She smiled to herself, whispering a quiet promise that one day she would return, not as a spectator but as a pianist who belonged there. Outside, the breeze felt different, lighter. The world seemed brighter somehow. For the first time in her life, Lena felt truly seen, and somewhere deep inside she knew this was only the beginning of her story. The next morning, the memory of that moment at the academy still played in Lena's mind like a song she couldn't stop hearing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the piano keys, the audience's stunned faces, and the way the sound had filled the room. It felt like a dream. She kept asking herself if it had really happened or if her imagination had just gotten the better of her. But then she remembered the applause, the warmth of it, and the instructor's kind eyes. It was real. At home, the small house was quiet except for the sound of birds outside. Lena helped her mother prepare breakfast, still lost in thought. Her mother noticed her silence and asked gently, "You're thinking about yesterday, aren't you?" Lena nodded, smiling shyly. "It felt like magic, Mama. For the first time, I touched a real piano. I thought I'd be scared, but when I started playing, it felt like the piano was talking to me." Her mother smiled softly. "Maybe it was, my dear. Sometimes music listens to those who truly love it." After breakfast, Lena decided to visit the town library. It was the only place where she could use an old computer to listen to piano music online. She sat in her usual corner, put on the headphones, and searched for classical pieces she had always wanted to learn. As the music played, her fingers moved quietly on the table, pretending to touch keys. The librarian, an older woman who had known Lena since childhood, watched her fondly. "One day you'll have your own piano," she said kindly. Lena smiled, though she wasn't sure if that day would ever come. Later that afternoon, while Lena was on her way home, she saw a car parked near her house. A man in a suit was standing outside speaking with her mother. For a moment, Lena froze, unsure who he was. When her mother noticed her, she waved her over quickly. "Lena, come here, dear," her mother called. The man turned and smiled politely. "You must be Lena," he said. "I'm from the town's music academy. The director sent me to find you." Lena's eyes widened. "The director?" she repeated, barely believing what she heard. He nodded. "Yes, he was deeply moved by your performance yesterday. He would like to speak with you." Lena's heart skipped a beat. She looked at her mother, who encouraged her with a small nod. "Go, dear. Don't be afraid," her mother said softly. Lena climbed into the car nervously, holding her small bag close to her chest. The ride to the academy felt longer than it really was. Her thoughts raced, and what if they had changed their minds? What if she had done something wrong? When they arrived, the director himself greeted her at the door. He was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Ah, our little pianist," he said warmly. "Please come in." His voice instantly made Lena feel at ease. He led her to his office, which was filled with photos, trophies, and music books. "I wanted to thank you personally," he began. "Your performance yesterday reminded me of why music exists in the first place. It wasn't perfect, but it was pure. That's something rare." Lena listened quietly, unsure what to say. She felt her cheeks grow warm. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. The director leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, how long have you been playing?" he asked. Lena hesitated. "I've never had lessons," she admitted. "I just watched videos and practiced on, well, a cardboard keyboard." The director's eyes widened. "A cardboard keyboard?" he repeated softly. Then after a moment he chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "That makes your talent even more extraordinary." He stood up and walked toward the window, deep in thought. "Lena, I want to offer you something," he said finally. "We have an opening in our scholarship program. It's usually for students who apply months in advance, but after what I heard yesterday, I believe you deserve a chance. Would you like to study here?" For a moment, Lena couldn't speak. Her breath caught in her throat. "Study here?" she whispered. The director smiled. "Yes, we'll provide your lessons and even access to the piano rooms. You'll just have to promise one thing, to work hard." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I promise," she said softly. The director extended his hand and she shook it, still trembling with disbelief. As she left his office, she passed by a few students who recognized her from the day before. Some smiled politely. Others avoided eye contact, still embarrassed about how they had treated her. But Lena didn't feel angry. She just felt grateful. That evening, she rushed home and told her mother everything. Her mother hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Your father would be too." They sat together for a long time, just smiling, neither saying much. Sometimes joy didn't need words. The next day was Lena's first official lesson at the academy. She arrived early, nervous but excited. The instructor from the audition, the same one who had doubted her, greeted her at the door. "Good morning, Lena," he said kindly this time. "Ready to start?" She nodded. The lesson began with simple exercises. The instructor watched her carefully, noticing how quickly she adapted. Her fingers, though inexperienced, seemed to know exactly where to go. He shook his head in amazement. "You have something special, Lena," he said after a while. "Technique can be taught, but feeling, that's something you're born with." Lena smiled shyly, not used to compliments. When the lesson ended, she stayed in the practice room for hours, unwilling to leave. Every note felt like a new world opening before her. She played until her fingers hurt, but she didn't mind. For her, it wasn't work. It was freedom. As days turned into weeks, the academy began to change for Lena. The same students who once mocked her now greeted her with respect. Some even asked for her help with their pieces. She never boasted or showed off. She simply shared what she knew. People admired her humility as much as her talent. But even with her growing popularity, Lena never forgot where she came from. Every night she still returned home to her small house, helped her mother, and practiced quietly on her old cardboard keyboard, smiling at the memory of where it all began. One afternoon, after class, the director called her again. "Lena," he said gently, "we have a special event coming up. A public recital for the community. I'd like you to perform." Lena froze. "Me?" she asked, surprised. Yes, you, the director said with a smile. You've inspired everyone here. It's time others heard your music too. The thought terrified her. Playing in front of people was one thing, but performing on a stage with an audience of hundreds was another. I don't know if I can, she whispered. The director nodded understandingly. You can. You've already proven that once. Believe in yourself. For days, Lena practiced relentlessly. She spent every free moment in the piano room rehearsing the piece she had chosen, a melody she had written herself. It wasn't fancy or complicated, but it told her story, the story of a girl who dreamed big even when life seemed small. The instructors encouraged her, and even her classmates came by to listen. Each time they left moved by the emotion in her playing. Finally, the day of the recital arrived. The auditorium was packed with families, students, and townspeople. Lena peeked from behind the curtain, her heart pounding. She saw her mother sitting in the front row, smiling proudly. When her name was announced, the audience clapped warmly. She walked onto the stage, feeling the lights on her face, and sat down at the grand piano. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes. The noise faded. It was just her and the piano again. She took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. The first notes were soft, almost like a whisper, but then the melody grew, filling the hall with warmth and emotion. Every sound told a piece of her heart's story, her struggles, her hopes, and her gratitude. As she played, some in the audience wiped their eyes. Her music wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. When the final note faded, there was silence. The same deep silence she remembered from the audition. Then, as if on cue, the entire hall erupted in applause. Lena looked up, overwhelmed. Her mother was clapping the hardest, tears running down her face. That night, as she walked home under the stars, Lena realized how far she had come. She didn't need to dream about pianos anymore. She was living her dream. And deep down, she knew this was just the beginning of something even greater. The applause from the recital echoed in Lena's mind for days. Every time she thought about that night, she felt her heart fill with warmth. It had been the biggest moment of her life so far. People from the town still talked about her performance. Some said they had never heard music that made them feel so deeply. Others couldn't believe that the same quiet girl who once stood in the corner of the Academy Hall had become the star of the show. But for Lena, it wasn't about being famous or noticed. It was about finally sharing her heart through music. After the recital, her life at the Academy changed completely. Teachers began to pay special attention to her training. She was given access to more advanced lessons and a small private room with an old piano to practice on whenever she wanted. It wasn't the grand piano from the hall, but it was enough. Every morning before class and every evening before going home, Lena spent hours there practicing until her fingers ached. She loved every moment of it. Still, even with her growing success, Lena remained humble. She never bragged or showed off. She helped her classmates whenever they struggled with their pieces, even those who had once mocked her. One day, while helping a student who had trouble reading sheet music, she smiled and said, "Don't worry about playing perfectly. Just play with feeling. The piano understands." The other student looked surprised, but later admitted that her advice had changed the way he played. The director often stopped by during her practice sessions. He would stand quietly near the door listening. He noticed that Lena didn't just play songs she told stories through them. Sometimes her music was joyful. Other times it carried a soft sadness that made people stop and listen. He saw in her what few students had, a natural connection with emotion. One afternoon he said to her, "You remind me of a time when musicians played for the love of it, not for applause." Lena smiled and replied, "That's the only way I know how to play." As the weeks passed, Lena started writing her own music more often. She filled notebooks with melodies that came to her in dreams or while walking home from the academy. Her teacher noticed her talent and encouraged her to perform one of her original pieces at the upcoming Inter-Academy Showcase, a competition between different music schools. It was an honor to be chosen, but it also came with pressure. When Lena heard the news, she felt both excited and nervous. "I've never competed before," she said softly. Her teacher smiled kindly. "Then it's time you did. Just be yourself on that stage. That's all you need." The days leading up to the competition were intense. Lena practiced from morning until late night, perfecting her song. It was a piece she had written about her journey, the struggles, the laughter, and the hope that had guided her through everything. The melody started softly, then grew stronger, symbolizing courage. Every note meant something personal. But the more she practiced, the more doubts crept into her mind. What if they don't like it? What if I mess up? She whispered to herself more than once. Her mother noticed her worry one night as Lena sat at the table staring at her sheet music. "What's wrong?" her mother asked gently. Lena sighed. "What if I'm not good enough? There will be so many talented people." Her mother took her hand and said softly, "You don't have to be better than anyone, dear. Just play from your heart like you always do. That's enough." Her mother's words stayed with her. On the day of the competition, Lena arrived early. The event was being held in a large auditorium in the city, far bigger than anything she had ever seen. The other competitors looked confident, dressed in elegant clothes and surrounded by their teachers. Lena stood quietly, clutching her music sheets, trying to calm her nerves. When one of the other contestants noticed her, they smiled politely but with a hint of curiosity. "Are you from the small-town academy?" they asked. Lena nodded shyly. "I heard about your recital," another said. "People say you play with emotion." Lena smiled slightly. "I just play what I feel." When it was finally her turn, Lena walked onto the stage slowly, her heart pounding. The lights were bright and she could barely see the audience. She sat down at the piano, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. In that moment, she remembered her mother's words, her old cardboard keyboard, and the first time she dared to touch a real piano. She smiled faintly and began to play. The first few notes were soft, gentle, like the beginning of a story. Then the music began to rise, filling the hall with warmth and color. Every emotion she had ever felt, fear, hope, gratitude, flowed through her fingers. The melody danced and cried and laughed all at once. It was more than a song. It was a reflection of her soul. The judges leaned forward, listening intently. The audience sat still, captivated. Halfway through the piece, the lights flickered for a moment, but Lena didn't stop. She kept playing, lost in her own world. She didn't notice the judges exchanging amazed looks or the whispers spreading through the crowd. When she finally reached the last note, she let it linger for a moment, soft and fading, like a memory slowly disappearing into silence. When she lifted her hands, the room stayed silent for a few seconds, the same kind of silence that had followed her very first performance at the academy. Then came the applause, loud and endless. People stood up cheering, some even wiping away tears. Lena looked up, stunned. She had done it again. She had touched their hearts. Backstage, her teacher hugged her tightly. "You were brilliant," he said, his eyes shining with pride. The director, who had come to watch, nodded with approval. "That was beyond performance," he said quietly. "That was art." Lena didn't know what to say. She just smiled, her eyes wet with tears of happiness. Later that evening, when the results were announced, Lena's name was called for first place. The crowd clapped loudly and she walked to the stage to receive her award. But instead of holding it high or bowing dramatically, she simply whispered into the microphone, "Thank you for listening." Her voice was soft but filled with sincerity. That moment made her even more loved by everyone in the hall. When she returned home that night, the small town felt different. Her neighbors congratulated her. Her friends from the library hugged her, and her mother waited with open arms at the door. They didn't need words. The pride in her mother's eyes said everything. Over the next few weeks, Lena's story spread beyond the town. Newspapers wrote about the girl who had learned music without an instrument. The academy received letters from people wanting to meet her, and even a few music schools in the city reached out to offer her opportunities. But Lena stayed grounded. She continued her lessons, practiced daily, and never let fame distract her. One afternoon after class, the director called her again. "Lena," he said with a thoughtful smile, "you've inspired many people already, but tell me, what do you want next?" She thought for a moment before answering. "I just want to keep learning and play music that makes people feel something. That's all I've ever wanted." The director nodded approvingly. "Then you're already on the right path." That night, as Lena sat at the piano alone, she played softly, her fingers moving effortlessly. She thought about how everything had changed, not because she wanted to prove herself, but because she had followed her heart. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she wasn't afraid anymore. The piano had given her a voice, and she was ready to use it to bring light wherever she could. The moonlight streamed through the window, reflecting on the keys as she played a quiet lullaby she had written herself. It was gentle, full of hope. When she finished, she closed her eyes, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you, not to anyone in particular, but to life itself, for every moment that had led her here, for every note that had carried her forward." After the inter-academy showcase, Lena's confidence grew, but so did the challenges. Not everyone was happy about her rapid rise. Some students at the academy, who had once laughed at her, now watched her closely, comparing themselves to her. Their whispers followed her in the hallways, and she could feel the weight of their judgment even when she tried to ignore it. Lena had learned to play through fear, but now she had to play through attention and expectation. One morning, her instructor approached her with a serious look. "Lena," he said, "there is an upcoming citywide competition. Musicians from all over will participate. This is your chance to go further. Are you ready for this?" Lena's stomach tightened. She had been performing well at the academy, but the thought of competing on a bigger stage filled her with both excitement and anxiety. "I will try my best," she said softly. Her instructor nodded. "That is all anyone can ask." In the weeks that followed, Lena dedicated herself to preparing for the competition. She spent long hours at the academy piano, practicing scales and pieces she had never attempted before. The notes often felt difficult, but she persevered. Every night after she returned home, she would sit at her old cardboard keyboard, playing the same melodies she had written herself. Her fingers remembered the touch, even without the real keys, and her heart remained connected to the music. The academy was buzzing with students preparing for the citywide competition. Some of them were nervous, others were overly confident. A few approached Lena, offering help, while others whispered behind her back. Lena chose to ignore the negativity, focusing only on her own growth. She reminded herself that music was not about defeating others. It was about expressing oneself. One afternoon, while practicing a particularly challenging piece, Lena felt her hands falter. The notes tangled beneath her fingers, and she grew frustrated. She almost slammed her hands onto the keys, but stopped herself. Instead, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She remembered the first time she had touched a real piano, the fear she had overcome, and the joy that followed. Slowly, she played again, this time with more patience. The melody, though imperfect, carried a quiet strength that surprised even her. Her instructor watched from the doorway, nodding silently. "Sometimes mistakes make music more human," he said. Lena smiled. "I just want it to sound like me," she admitted. Her teacher patted her shoulder. "And that is the most important thing." As the day of the citywide competition approached, Lena's nerves grew stronger. She spent the night before packing her sheet music, polishing her shoes, and rehearsing one last time. Her mother hugged her tightly before she left. "Remember, dear, no matter what happens, your music has already touched hearts," she whispered. Lena felt a warmth in her chest, a comfort she would carry with her onto the stage. The city hall was enormous, far larger than any place Lena had performed before. Musicians from different schools filled the hall, each with their own unique style. Lena found her seat near the grand piano and looked around. Some performers seemed intimidating, dressed in elegant outfits and radiating confidence. Lena felt small for a moment, but she reminded herself that her strength was not in appearance or fancy clothing, but in her music and her heart. When her name was called, Lena walked to the stage, her hands trembling slightly. The audience was large, filled with strangers, but she felt a strange calmness. She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and looked at the keys. In that moment, she remembered every challenge she had faced, from practicing on cardboard keys at home to being mocked at the academy. She smiled softly and let her fingers fall onto the first notes. The music started gently, almost like a whisper, then grew in strength. Every note reflected her journey, her dreams, and the struggles she had overcome. She played a piece she had written herself, one that told a story of hope and perseverance. The audience listened in silence, captivated by the emotion that flowed from the piano. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the raw honesty of her performance. Halfway through, Lena noticed a few students from the academy in the front row. Their expressions were different from before. Some looked impressed. Others looked humbled. She felt a sense of calm wash over her. This was not about proving herself to them. It was about sharing her music with anyone willing to listen. As she reached the final notes, the music swelled and then softened, fading like a gentle breeze. The hall remained quiet for a moment, holding its breath before applause erupted. The sound was overwhelming, but Lena's heart was light. She had done what she came to do. She had shared her music, and it had touched people. Backstage, her instructor hugged her tightly. "You played with everything you had. I'm proud of you," he said. Lena smiled, feeling a mix of exhaustion and joy. She knew she had given her best. The director of the academy approached, his eyes shining with pride. "Lena, you've shown what true music can do," he said. "It's not just about technique. It's about heart, and you have it in abundance." The award ceremony began, and Lena waited nervously. Names were called one by one until finally her name was announced for first place. The audience cheered, and she walked to the stage to accept her medal. She felt a wave of disbelief. Just a few months ago, she had been mocked for touching a piano, and now she was standing as the champion. She smiled humbly, holding the medal and thanking everyone who had supported her. That night, Lena returned home exhausted but happy. Her mother was waiting with a warm meal and a comforting embrace. "You did it, Lena," she said softly. Lena nodded, tears in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without your support," she replied. They sat together, sharing a quiet moment of triumph. The days that followed were filled with invitations to perform, meet and greets with music lovers, and letters from people inspired by her story. Lena handled the attention gracefully, never letting it change who she was. She continued practicing, learning, and composing her own pieces. She knew that success was not just about winning competitions, but about growing as a musician and touching lives with her art. One afternoon, Lena was asked to perform at a small local event for children who wanted to learn music. She agreed gladly. As she played, she noticed the children's eyes light up with wonder. Their joy reminded her of her own beginnings, of the time she had practiced quietly at home, dreaming of a real piano. She smiled, realizing that sharing music was more rewarding than any award. Even the students who had once mocked her approached her, seeking advice and guidance. Lena welcomed them warmly, remembering how important kindness and patience had been in her own journey. She realized that her success could inspire others, and she wanted to be a positive influence just as her teachers had been for her. As the sun set over the town, Lena returned home and sat at her small keyboard. She played softly, reflecting on how far she had come. The road had not been easy. There were challenges, doubts, and moments of fear. But through it all, she had trusted in herself and her music. And now, standing on the other side, she felt stronger, ready for whatever the future might bring. She knew that more performances, competitions, and challenges lay ahead. But for now, she allowed herself to simply enjoy the music, letting it carry her through the quiet night. The piano had been her companion, her teacher, and her voice. It had taught her courage, patience, and the power of following one's heart. And as she played under the soft glow of the evening light, Lena felt a deep sense of peace. She had found her place in the world, not through recognition or praise, but after her citywide win, Lena's life began to feel busier, but also richer in ways she had never imagined. She was invited to perform at local festivals, charity events, and even at school gatherings. Each performance was different, yet every time she played, she felt the same thrill that had first pulled her toward the piano months ago. It was as if the instrument had become a part of her, and she could speak through it in ways she could not with words. One morning, Lena received an unexpected letter from a well-known music conservatory in the city. They had heard about her performances and wanted to offer her a summer program to study advanced techniques in composition. Her hands trembled as she held the envelope. She had never been outside her town for more than a few hours, and the thought of leaving home for weeks was both exciting and frightening. She showed the letter to her mother, who hugged her tightly. "This is your chance to grow, Lena. You must go," she said softly. Lena nodded, determination mixing with a little fear. She knew this was an opportunity she could not refuse. The following weeks were filled with preparation. Lena packed her things carefully, choosing her favorite notebooks and sheets of music to bring along. She practiced relentlessly, knowing that the conservatory would challenge her in ways the academy never could. Every day she imagined walking into the grand halls of the conservatory, surrounded by talented students and experienced teachers. It was a dream, yet also a test of courage. When she arrived at the conservatory, Lena felt a mix of awe and nervousness. The building was enormous, with tall windows and grand staircases. Students from all over the country were already there, carrying instruments and chatting excitedly. Lena felt small and shy as she navigated the halls, clutching her bag tightly. She was assigned a room and introduced to her instructors. They were kind, yet their eyes held an expectation that made her heart race. Her first day in class was challenging. The instructors introduced advanced techniques, exercises, and music theory that Lena had never encountered before. She felt overwhelmed at first, her fingers fumbling over unfamiliar passages. She almost gave up several times, but then she remembered her first real piano, the cardboard keys, and how far she had come. Slowly she adapted. Her natural connection to music helped her grasp the lessons quickly, even if her technical skills were still developing. During breaks, Lena observed the other students. Many of them had been playing since early childhood, had access to private tutors, and owned high-quality instruments. She could feel their experience, but she did not feel inferior. She reminded herself that her journey had been different, full of challenges that had shaped her unique style. Her music came from a place of emotion and heart, something that could not be taught. One afternoon, Lena was asked to perform in front of the faculty for a small evaluation. She sat at the grand piano, her fingers hovering over the keys. She began to play a piece she had composed herself, pouring every thought, memory, and feeling into the music. The first notes were soft, hesitant, but soon her confidence grew. She moved through the piece fluidly, each chord and melody reflecting her inner world. When the last note faded, the room was silent for a moment. Then the instructors applauded, nodding in approval. Lena felt a mixture of relief and pride. Over the next weeks, Lena continued to grow. She learned new techniques, experimented with different styles, and even collaborated with other students to create original compositions. Each day was a challenge, but it was also exhilarating. She practiced late into the night, often losing track of time, her mind consumed by music. The conservatory became a place where she felt free, where her love for the piano could flourish without limits. One evening, Lena was invited to a special recital for students and faculty. She was nervous as it was her first public performance outside her town. The auditorium was large and elegant, filled with people who expected exceptional music. She walked to the piano and sat down, taking a deep breath. As she began to play, she closed her eyes and let the music flow naturally. The notes told a story of a girl who had struggled, who had been laughed at, who had dreamed despite limitations. Each chord carried a piece of her journey, and the audience responded with quiet awe. When she finished, the applause was long and heartfelt. Faculty members complimented her on her emotion and originality. Other students came to congratulate her, some amazed at the depth of feeling she could bring to her music. Lena felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. Even in a room full of highly talented musicians, she had made her voice heard. As the program progressed, Lena began to notice subtle changes in herself. She was more confident, not just in her music, but in life. She learned to manage pressure, to embrace challenges, and to trust in her abilities. The experiences at the conservatory taught her that talent alone was not enough. Perseverance, practice, and emotional connection were equally important. She also discovered the joy of sharing her music with others, inspiring them to explore their own potential. Towards the end of the summer program, Lena was asked to participate in the final recital, a prestigious event for all the conservatory students. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the opportunity to showcase everything she had learned. She worked tirelessly, refining her composition, practicing each passage until it resonated with precision and emotion. Her instructors offered guidance, but she made sure that the piece reflected her own voice, her own story. The night of the recital arrived, and Lena stepped onto the stage, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. The audience was large, and the lights shone brightly. She took her seat at the grand piano, looked at the keys, and remembered every step of her journey. From the cardboard keyboard to the first recital, from being mocked to standing as a champion. She took a deep breath and began to play. The music started softly, drawing the audience in with a gentle, inviting melody. As she continued, the piece built, weaving layers of emotion and nuance. The notes were precise yet full of feeling, carrying the story of her struggles, dreams, and triumphs. The audience listened, captivated. Some closed their eyes, lost in the music. Others leaned forward, eager to catch every subtle sound. Lena played not for recognition, but for the music itself, letting it flow from her heart. When the final chord faded, the hall was silent for a moment. Then the audience erupted into applause, cheering and clapping for the girl who had captured their hearts with her music. Lena smiled, a mix of relief, pride, and gratitude washing over her. Her instructors came forward, praising her technique and the emotional depth of her performance. Even the students who had seemed confident before now looked at her with respect and admiration. That night, Lena returned to her room, exhausted but happy. She reflected on how far she had come. From a shy girl practicing on cardboard keys to a musician recognized for her talent and heart. She understood that music was not about being the best or competing with others. It was about expressing oneself, connecting with others, and embracing the journey, no matter how difficult. In the weeks following the recital, Lena received invitations to perform in various events and workshops. She continued to write music, compose new pieces, and explore different styles. But she also made time to mentor younger students who were just starting their musical journeys. She wanted to share not only her skills, but also the lessons she had learned about perseverance, courage, and staying true to oneself. One afternoon, Lena returned home from the conservatory. Her town had welcomed her with open arms, celebrating her achievements. People she had grown up with admired her, not just for her talent, but for her humility and dedication. Lena smiled as she walked through familiar streets, feeling a sense of belonging that went beyond her music. She realized that her journey was far from over, but she had already achieved something precious, the ability to inspire and touch hearts through her passion. That night, Lena sat at her small keyboard at home, playing softly. She reflected on everything that had happened, the struggles, the mockery, the victories, and the lessons learned. Her fingers moved effortlessly, each note a reminder of her journey. She smiled quietly, knowing that she had not only grown as a musician but as a person. And as she played under the soft glow of the moonlight streaming through the window, Lena felt a deep sense of peace, ready for the next chapter of her life, whatever it might bring. After returning home from the conservatory, Lena felt a mix of relief and excitement. She had grown so much both as a musician and as a person, but she knew there were still new paths to explore. The experiences she had gained over the summer had opened her eyes to the world of music beyond her small town, but her heart always returned to the piano in her little home, the one that had been there through every triumph and struggle. Her days quickly filled with a new rhythm. Morning practices, lessons at the academy, and small performances around town became her routine. People were eager to hear her play, but Lena remained grounded. She played not for recognition, but because it was who she was. Every time her fingers touched the keys, she felt alive, and she wanted others to feel that joy too. One afternoon, as Lena practiced in the academy, a small group of children wandered in, curious and wide-eyed. They had heard about the girl who had once been mocked but had now become a celebrated pianist. Their eyes sparkled as they looked at the piano. Lena smiled warmly and invited them to sit nearby. She began playing a simple melody, soft and inviting. The children watched closely, trying to mimic the notes with imaginary keys on their laps. Lena laughed quietly, enjoying the innocence and curiosity that reminded her of herself when she had first started. After the small demonstration, she encouraged them to try. Some hesitated, but Lena knelt beside them, showing them where to place their fingers, guiding their movements gently. One by one, their hesitant notes turned into tiny melodies. Lena felt a sense of satisfaction she had never felt from performing alone. Teaching others, sharing her love for music brought a new kind of fulfillment. Weeks turned into months, and Lena's reputation as both a performer and mentor grew. Letters arrived from other towns inviting her to give workshops or perform at events. Yet she remained selective, choosing to balance her performances with the joy of helping younger musicians. She wanted to remember where she came from, the journey that had shaped her, and she wanted others to feel the same encouragement she had once received. One day, Lena received an invitation to perform at a regional music festival, an event that gathered musicians from various cities. The thought of performing on a bigger stage made her heart race. This time, the audience would not just be her local community, but people she had never met before. She spent weeks preparing, refining a new piece she had written, a story of hope, struggle, and triumph told entirely through her music. The day of the festival arrived, and Lena stepped onto a stage much larger than any she had seen before. The bright lights were intense and the audience was vast, stretching into the darkened hall. For a moment her nerves returned, whispering doubts into her mind. But she remembered the cardboard keyboard at home, the first recital at the academy, and the applause that had once silenced the mocking voices. She took a deep breath, sat down, and placed her fingers on the piano. The first notes began softly like a gentle breeze, drawing the audience into the story she wanted to tell. As the melody developed, her emotions poured through each chord, each scale, each pause. The music spoke of her struggles, the times she had been underestimated, and the moments of courage that had defined her path. The audience listened intently, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes, allowing themselves to be swept away by the emotion. Halfway through her performance, Lena noticed a few musicians and judges exchanging looks of amazement. They could see the depth of feeling she had embedded in the music. Unlike technical displays, her playing was alive and full of meaning. When she reached the final notes, she let them linger, soft and fading, creating a silence that seemed to hold the entire hall. Then came the applause. It was thunderous, sweeping through the auditorium, and Lena felt tears prick her eyes. She had done it again. The music had spoken and people had listened. It was not just applause for technical skill, but recognition of the heart behind every note. She stood, bowed humbly, and walked off the stage, carrying a sense of achievement that words could not describe. Backstage, her instructor from the academy, who had traveled to see her perform, hugged her tightly. "You've come so far, Lena. You've shown everyone what music can truly do," he said. Lena smiled, exhausted but exhilarated. She knew that she had not only achieved personal success, but had also inspired others to believe in themselves and their music. In the days following the festival, invitations continued to arrive, offers to perform, teach, or even travel for music programs. But Lena began to consider a new goal. She realized that while she loved performing, she wanted to create something lasting, a way to give back to the community that had supported her journey. She began planning a small music program for children in her town, a place where they could learn, explore, and express themselves freely. The program took months to organize. Lena worked with the local community center, gathered instruments, and created lesson plans that focused not just on technique but on love for music. When the first class started, she was nervous, unsure how the children would respond. But as she began teaching, her natural warmth and passion shone through. The children were engaged, eager to learn, and filled with curiosity. Lena found joy in their progress, their small victories, and their laughter. One day, as Lena helped a young boy learn a simple scale, she noticed him smile brightly. "I think I can do it now," he exclaimed. Lena smiled, feeling a familiar warmth. "Yes, you can," she said gently. Moments like this reminded her of herself, of the first time she had touched a piano and how far she had come. She realized that teaching was not just about sharing knowledge, but about nurturing confidence and hope. As the months passed, the program grew. More children joined, and parents expressed gratitude for the positive influence music was having on their lives. Lena organized small recitals where the students could perform for their families, giving them a sense of accomplishment and pride. Each event reminded her of the power of music, to inspire, to heal, and to bring people together. Lena continued to perform, both locally and at select events, but her heart remained rooted in the community she had grown up in. She knew that while recognition and awards were gratifying, the true joy came from touching lives through music. She also never forgot the lessons of humility, patience, and perseverance that had carried her from the days of mockery to the heights of success. One quiet evening, Lena sat by her piano at home reflecting on her journey. She thought about the times she had been mocked, the nights she had practiced alone, the moments of doubt, and the triumphs that followed. She realized that every challenge had shaped her, every setback had strengthened her, and every note she had played had brought her closer to herself. She closed her eyes and began to play, softly at first, then with increasing confidence and feeling. The music flowed effortlessly, telling the story of her life, the struggles, the dreams, the hope, and the triumphs. Each chord resonated with the experiences that had made her who she was. In that moment, Lena felt complete, at peace with her journey and excited for the future yet to come. The piano had been more than an instrument. It had been her companion, her voice, and her teacher. It had given her courage, opened doors, and connected her with others in ways she had never imagined. Lena knew that her journey was ongoing, that there would be new challenges and opportunities ahead. But she also knew that as long as she trusted in herself and followed her heart, music would guide her through anything. As she played the final notes, the room fell silent. Lena opened her eyes, smiling softly, a sense of calm and fulfillment washing over her. She had touched hearts, inspired others, and found her place in the world. And though the journey had been long and filled with obstacles, every step had been worth it. Lena leaned back, her hands resting on the keys, and whispered quietly to herself, "This is just the beginning." Outside, the stars shone brightly, casting a soft glow over the town. Inside, the sound of music lingered, a testament to a girl who had been mocked, who had dared to dream, and who had, in the end, left everyone speechless with her gift.